333 Mo'uar, Retne Tun, Ode. This inscription was written on a plaque on the door of a small room. The room was in the west wing of a monastery complex in northern Portugal, and that way you would only have been able to read the sign if you were looking outside from inside the room. But the wooden door would have had to be made of glass, or the person in question would have needed X-ray vision. It was a door that was common in this wing of the monastery. It stood out a little from the normal standard. It was friendly and bright and seemed to say, "I'll be happy if you open me up." But the small sign was intended to have the exact opposite effect. No one should enter the room. Nevertheless, there was someone who was more likely to be guided by the friendliness of the door than by the message on the sign. Because suddenly, you could hear someone tampering with the locking mechanism on the door. Then the door was pushed open and in came Jarmo Dorak, an officer of the ASTROCOHORS CLUB, who was on the trail of a secret. He pushed the door closed and leaned against it as if to prevent anyone from following him. Then, still breathless, he listened to see if any of the guards had noticed he had entered the room. But that didn't seem to be the case.
Okay,
he said to himself.
So this is it. The room of the sixth sister. Maybe I find a clue why she's gone missing.
The room looked as bright and friendly as the door. The furniture and the ceiling were made of the same wood. Only the resident,
Nice.
the sixth sister, was not here.
Nice room. Indeed. Oh, what's this? A book? Maybe the last thing she read before she disappeared. The Neverending Story.
He read the title of the book aloud as if someone were there to listen. Then he opened the book and, following an inner instinct, he began to read it. And that means there are spoilers for the content of the story from now on.
At first, before we take a look at the book, let's talk about the author, Michael Ende. His full name is Michael Andreas Helmut Ende. He was born in Garmisch, Germany in 1929 and was the son of the surrealist painter Edgar Ende. He was one of the most successful children's book authors in Germany. His works were translated into 40 languages and sold over 30 million copies. His first and also one of his most successful books was Jim Button and Luke the Engine Driver, which came out in 1960. Ende's love for word puns is evident right from the first book. For him, it was probably logical that he, whose name is Ende, literally meaning end in German, should write a story that has never ending in the title. In German, the cover shows a direct contradiction between end and never ending. Almost as if the author had removed himself from the story. The Neverending Story was Ende's 9th book, but was actually his 8th story, because Jim Button's story, which appeared in 2 parts, was supposed to be 1 book. After the Neverending Story, Ende wrote a total of 10 books before he died in Filderstadt, Germany in 1995. 4 additional stories were published posthumously. The story of the book itself is almost as exciting as its plot. Ende initially had to be convinced by his publisher to write a book at all. The author then looked through his notes and found a piece of paper with an idea that read like this. While reading a book, a boy literally gets caught up in the story and has difficulty finding his way out again. Ende was convinced that such a story would barely make 100 pages, but he set about to write it. As he wrote it, Ende later said, the story literally exploded. According to his own statements, he created a huge work within 3 years, 4/5 of which he deleted. Particularly difficult for Ende, and no pun intended, was the end of his book. He didn't know how to bring back the protagonist of the story, Bastian. But thanks to a burst water pipe in his house, the crucial idea came to him. The book was published in 1979. It was a great success and was repeatedly turned into various adaptations from the mid-1980s onwards. We'll get to those later. The Neverending Story is against materialism and the contempt for imagination. We will take a closer look at the themes of the story. But before we look at the motives and the story, let's take a look at the structure. This one is particularly interesting because it involves 2 stories, or more precisely, 2 heroes' journeys, which are also intertwined. This in turn fits the symbol of Oren, which is 2 snakes biting each other's tail, forming an oval. We also find this symbol on the cover of the book. Michael Ende was an opponent of rigid structures, so we have to assume that the fact that both parts of the book follow the concept of the hero's journey, as Joseph Campbell describes it in his book The Hero with 1,000 Faces, is more likely random. Ende probably followed his gut feeling and went through the stages of the hero's journey because it felt good for him. Additionally, if the book that you're reading follows Ende's specifications, it is printed in 2 colors, red and green. The 2 colors represent the worlds in which the book takes place. Whenever we are in the real world, the text is printed in red. Whenever it is the world of fantasy, it is printed in green. Now that we have that out of the way, let's get started. Clearly, the first pages of the book are printed in red, so we start in the real world. The story begins in a bookstore. A boy of 10 or 11 comes rushing through the door. He meets the owner of the shop, a certain Carl Conrad Coriander. We learn that the boy's name is Bastian Balthazar Bux, and he was on the run from classmates who teased him because of his obesity and his love of books. But Coriander doesn't like children and asks him to leave as quickly as possible. But then his phone rings. While the bookseller is on the phone, Bastian looks at the book that Coriander had just read. It is called The Neverending Story. Bastian is fascinated. A story that never ends, just right for him. That's why he takes the book with him and runs to school. However, he is way too late and so decides to just skip class. He sneaks into the school attic and starts reading The Never-Ending Story. This is how we began our first hero's journey. We learned something about the protagonist Bastian, saw how the adventure in form of the book called him and how he followed the call. However, he doesn't yet know that the stolen book is the start of his own adventure. According to Campbell, the hero initially rejects the call of adventure before being forced, usually by external circumstances, to give in. But we don't get that far here, because now the second hero's journey begins, which we will follow. The events of the book within the book, The Never-Ending Story. Directly, we end up in the middle of the story. A few inhabitants of the world Phantasia or Fantastica meet by chance. A night wight, a rockbiter named Pionorachchark, and a Will-o'-the-Wisp. Will-o'-the-Wisp, whoa. They all report the same thing. Phantasia is in danger because the nothing is spreading. Parts of Phantasia simply disappear. There is just nothing left behind. The residents of Phantasia who meet there are ambassadors of their respective people. They are on their way to the center of their world, the Ivory Tower, where the Childlike Empress, ruler of the world of fantasy, resides. When they get there, they realize they aren't the only ones. Ambassadors come from literally all corners of the world, because the same phenomenon is observed everywhere. The nothing is spreading. Then a centaur steps in front of the crowd. It is Chiron, the doctor, who tells the crowd that the Childlike Empress is ill. She must be healed so that Phantasia can be saved. For this purpose, Chiron should look for the great warrior Atreyu, who belongs to the green-skinned people. He is supposed to find the cure for the Empress. Chiron received the Orin from the Childlike Empress, her sign, also called the Pentacle or simply the Shine. It consists of two snakes biting each other's tail, forming an oval. Anyone who bears the symbol is under the personal protection of the Childlike Empress. Chiron must bring the Orin to Atreyu and give him the task. To do this, the physician travels to the area of the Grass Sea, which lies behind the Silver Mountains. Atreyu lives here with his people, but Chiron is surprised when he finally faces Atreyu. He's not a great warrior. He's a boy, maybe 10 years old. But the Childlike Empress's instructions were clear. Atreyu is the one who will find her cure. He's not very happy because Chiron's arrival has interrupted an important ritual in which he would become a hunter. Now he has to wait a whole year. But when the centaur explains to him what it's all about, Atreyu is ready to embark on the great search. He is not allowed to take any weapons with him, only his horse, a stallion named Artax. The two travel through Phantasia and encounter traces of the nothing, until Atreyu finally sees a buffalo in a dream that he would have shot. The buffalo gives him the clue to look for a creature called the Ancient Mauler. What Atreyu doesn't know is that he's being followed. After the boy set out on his great search, a strange creature appeared and followed his trail, driven by the irrepressible will to find and destroy the Seeker. In the meanwhile, Atreyu has reached the Swamps of Sadness, where the Ancient Mauler is said to live. But his horse Artax is overcome by sadness and sinks into the swamp. Atreyu moves on and comes across a huge hill in the middle of the swamps. The Ancient Mauler is said to live here, but suddenly the hill moves. The hill is the Ancient Mauler herself, a huge, ill-tempered turtle who likes to talk to herself. Mauler doesn't care about anything. When Atreyu asks her to help him so that Phantasia is not destroyed, she makes it clear to him that she doesn't care about Phantasia. She is so old that she has seen everything and nothing matters anymore. But Atreyu manages to persuade her to help him. She tells him the cure for the Childlike Empress, a name. But no creature from Phantasia can give the Empress a name. But perhaps the Southern Oracle knows more. The only problem is the Oracle is far away. Even Atreyu, who is still young, could not get there alive. Without his horse, Atreyu now sets out on foot to reach the Southern Oracle, although his chances are slim. But on his way he gets lost in the Dead Mountains. There he meets a terrible monster in a crevice called Igramul the Many. Igramul can shapeshift because, strictly speaking, it is not a single being, but a swarm of many insect-like creatures. When Bastian reads the description of Igramul's atrocity, he lets out a scream of terror, which is heard by Atreyu and Igramul. Bastian becomes suspicious. Back in Phantasia, Igramul has stretched a spiderweb and caught a luck dragon there, the most beautiful and noble creatures in Phantasia. Since luck dragons can fly, Atreyu hopes to use it to reach the Southern Oracle, but Igramul is not ready to give up her catch. Anyway, everything is too late. Igramul has bitten the luck dragon, and her poison will kill him within an hour. And even if that weren't the case, the luck dragon would never get Atreyu to the Southern Oracle in time. Phantasia is just too big. But Igramul knows a solution even if Atreyu doesn't like it, because Igramul's poison gives whoever is bitten the ability to teleport to any place they want. Of course, Igramul kept this a secret, otherwise any prey might simply escape. Still, it means the person will die within an hour of the bite. But Atreyu still wants to try. Lets himself be bitten and wishes for the location of the Southern Oracle.
Well, that would scare me too.
Every poison has an antidote. The luck dragon puts it that simply. After the bite, Atreyu initially became unconscious and woke up again in a rocky landscape. But he wasn't alone. The luck dragon, which was caught in Igramul's net, took advantage of the chance and also escaped. He introduces himself as Falkor and is in a positive mood because everything will be fine from now on. But how? He doesn't know that either, but after all, he's a luck dragon. Shortly afterwards, Atreyu notices how Igramul's poison is working and he and Falkor fall unconscious. But then Atreyu wakes up again and finds himself in the care of a lady gnome. Her name is Urgel, and together with her husband Engibuk, they are the two hermits who live at the entrance to the Southern Oracle. Urgel takes care of Atreyu and Falkor and manages to neutralize Igramul's poison. Engibuk explains that he knows the Southern Oracle as well as possible. After all, he has been researching here for years. However, he only knows the 3 gates that lead to the Oracle. None of the visitors have ever told him about the Oracle itself. What's more, it's very difficult to even get there. The 3 gates are 3 tests that the visitor must pass. With Engibuk's clues, Atreyu sets off. The first gate is 2 sphinxes looking at each other. Atreyu has to pass through their gaze. But he can only move forward if the sphinxes close their eyes and let him through. Otherwise, he will be paralyzed and has to solve every riddle in the world before he can go again. Atreyu is extremely tense and bravely walks forward. At some point, he realizes that he has long since left the gate behind him. He has passed the first test. The second gate is the Magic Mirror Gate. It consists of a large mirror that Atreyu must pass through. But the mirror doesn't just show one's own image, it shows the inside of the person who steps in front of the mirror. If someone really is a monster inside, this will be shown to them here. Atreyu slowly approaches and expects the worst, but the mirror shows him the image of a small pale boy, about his age, reading a book in the attic of a house. When Bastian reads this, he recognizes himself, but he still dismisses it as a coincidence. In any case, Atreyu can pass through the Magic Mirror Gate without any problems. But he has no idea what is happening to him at that moment. He forgets everything he has experienced so far. He doesn't know what he's looking for or why he's even here. And so he stands in front of the last gate, the No-Key Gate. As the name suggests, this gate does not have a keyhole. Of course, there is no key either. There is no door handle. The gate has to open itself, but it only does so if you don't want to go through it. Well, but since Atreyu has forgotten everything, he doesn't want to go through. Bastian cheers him on, and without knowing why, Atreyu goes towards the No-Key Gate. It opens for him, and Atreyu enters the Southern Oracle. Atreyu finds a pillared palace, but the Southern Oracle itself is only a voice passing through the pillars. Uyulala, the voice of silence in the deep mystery palace. Atreyu has to speak to her in rhymes. A wonderful conversation develops that is very difficult to summarize here. Because of details like these, anyone interested in fantasy is advised to read the book. Ende wrote it, among other things, to inspire others. We'll take a look at that. And accordingly, the story is full of fantastic things that you have to read. Unfortunately, the wonderful conversation has to be shortened here to the result. Atreyu, who still doesn't remember anything, gets his answer in a roundabout way. The childlike empress needs a name, and only a human child can give her that name. Atreyu falls asleep. When he awakens, he finds himself in a desert landscape. Nothing is there anymore, neither the deep secret palace nor the 3 gates. It takes a long time for him to find the place where he met the gnomes. Falkor finds him there and brings him to the 2 hermits. Atreyu learns that he was absent for 7 days and 7 nights. In time, the Nothing has gotten closer. The Southern Oracle was probably destroyed. This breaks Engiwuk's heart. He finally has a report from the Southern Oracle, but it's no longer of any use. Atreyu and Falkor set out to search for a human child, which can be found beyond the borders of Phantasia. But a conversation with the wind giants reveals a problem. Phantasia has no borders. So how will he ever find a human child? Falkor and Atreyu get involved in the dispute between the wind giants. The luck dragon can no longer hold on, and Atreyu falls from his back into the sea. But he is rescued by the merfolk and finally wakes up on a beach. Although he survived, he lost Orin. Now he must continue without the protection of the Shine. He goes inland, away from the sea, and encounters a strange procession of various creatures from Phantasia, who deliberately throw themselves into the Nothing. Even Atreyu, now that he's no longer carrying Orin, feels an urge to willingly jump into the Nothing. He is able to resist the urge, continues walking, and comes to a ghostly town. Falkor flies over the sea. He looks for Atreyu and finally sees a light beneath the waves. Orin. Meanwhile, Atreyu has encountered a strange creature in the old city. A werewolf who calls himself Gmorg. Without knowing that Atreyu is the one sent on the great search, the werewolf explains that he was tasked with hunting down and taking down the person sent by the childlike empress. He is a servant of the Nothing. He is a werewolf, which means he lives in 2 worlds, Phantasia and the world of humans and human children. Phantasia must be destroyed because without fantasy, people in the real world are easier to control. He claims that the Nothing is the only way for creatures of Phantasia to enter the human world, but their life here would be short-lived. They would become lies. This is the only use of fantasy that Gmorg and his employers find useful. Gmorg describes how he followed Atreyu to the Dead Mountains, where he lost track of him. He came to the city, and when the ruler of the city found out who he was working for, she had him chained up to die. Atreyu now admits to Gmorg that he was the one he hunted, whereupon Gmorg dies laughing. But Atreyu gets too close to his body, so Gmorg reflexively bites and pinches Atreyu's leg. Falkor comes to the rescue just in time. The Nothing is already threateningly close. There is hardly anything left of Phantasia, only the ivory tower to which Falkor now takes Atreyu. And here he meets the childlike Empress. Atreyu wants to admit his failure, but the Empress says he didn't fail. What Gmorg said is only partially true. There are 2 paths from Phantasia to the real world. One is from Phantasia into the real world through the Nothing. That is the wrong way. The other is from the real world to Phantasia, which humans can take. That is the right path. because only humans can come to Phantasia and back again, and thus help both worlds. The Empress also insists that Atreyu has already brought Phantasia's savior with him. He is there. He just has to do the right thing and everything will be okay again. It becomes more and more clear to Bastian that he is being referred to. He followed Atreyu's adventures and was brought to this place by him. But Bastian tries to remain realistic. This can't be true. In doing so, he forces the childlike Empress to take an extreme measure. She visits the old man from the Wandering Mountain, who is writing down the Neverending Story, and orders him to read the story out. Much to Bastian's surprise, the story does not begin with Atreyu's assignment, but with Bastian fleeing from his classmates into Coriander's bookstore. He witnesses how he himself steals the book and begins to read it. Here, the story repeats itself, but with everything Bastian did besides reading, lighting candles, going to the toilet once, and eating an apple. At the point when the childlike Empress visits the old man of the Wandering Mountain again, everything starts again and goes on and on, unless Bastian breaks the cycle. Great search, that's what the childlike Empress called the mission. And finally it's at the end, because Bastian says the name he chose for the Empress: Moonchild. The circle of eternal repetition stops and everything starts from zero. Bastian must now use the power of his imagination to rebuild Phantasia. This ends one hero's journey, but the other continues.
And all this time, Jarmo had been reading this story to find out more. However, he had no idea that he had also reached a point where he would have to intervene in this story. But other powers made this very clear to him, because as he read, something strange happened.
Hello. Hello, my friend, can you hear me? It's time that this story takes another turn, because it's all happening again, and Phantasia needs your help.
What have I to do?
You know the answer. You have to give me a name. It's just that simple.
Okay. Edda!
Oh, I'm afraid to ask, but where are we?
We are in the place you brought us through by giving me a name. But maybe you would like to see something more?
Oh yes, that would be nice.
Then look me straight in the eye.
But where are your eyes?
They are right here. Hello and welcome back.
Wait, are you the childlike Empress?
Do I look like a childlike Empress? Certainly not. I am the adult-like Empress. I brought you here because the realm of fantasy is once again in great distress. Lies are becoming more and more widespread in the human world, and now a new threat has emerged.
What? What is this new threat?
We here call it adaptations. People bastardize the works that originally come from the realm of fantasy, and the wonderful creatures of Phantasia become wooden distortions of themselves. They do all this to control people with the wrong fantasies, so that the fantasy only serves its purpose, be it propaganda or to be commercially exploited. And with this, the nothing can come back again.
And what can I do to help?
You follow the path of the Neverending Story through Phantasia. You start in Gum Forest. From there, you have to cross a mountain range, the crown of the world. When you descend from the crown of the world, you come through the forest with the Gate of Laughter. Pass through the gate and continue until you see the Silver Lake. You have to hold the pentacle in the water of the Silver Lake, and everything will become clear. But be warned, not everything that glitters is gold.
Whatever you say, Your Majesty. When do I start?
You start right now.
The transition had felt strange, but before he knew it, Jarmo found himself in a forest. The sun was shining. You could hear a stream somewhere, and the air was clear.
Okay. Bit cold out here. Oh.
It seemed to him that the Empress had taken care of everything.
Okay.
After putting on the jacket, he discovered a pendant attached to a leather cord hanging from a tree. The pendant consisted of a wooden circle with 2 snakes coiling inside. Apparently, that was the sign of this Empress, or maybe it was just closer to the original than what would later be seen in the films.
Okay, here we go.
And with that, he was on his way. He would continue to make his way through the Neverending Story, just as the adult-like Empress had said. But that is another story and will be told another time.